Welcome to Norway, Elizabeth Parrish.
Thank you.
Elizabeth? Liz?
Liz.
I saw that on Twitter.
Yeah, I hear Elizabeth when my dad is mad at me.
Right,
so.
exactly. A strict tone. Liz, are you younger today than you were a few years ago?
Well, you know, that's something that we're looking at. So a couple years ago, in 2015, I took 2 experimental gene therapies to see if they were safe, if we could forge ahead and use these therapies to treat aging and childhood disease. In some of my cells, we see lengthened telomeres. My C-reactive protein is lower, which is a good indication.
Telomeres are caps on the end of the chromosomes?
Yeah,
so you basically slowed down the degeneration of cells?
Yeah, well, the idea is actually to reverse the degeneration of cells. Yes. So when a lot of people say that they don't want to live longer, they just don't want to be old longer. But we don't want to make people who are old longer. We actually want to reverse their aging and make them youthful. So So they're youthful longer? Yes, so they're youthful longer. So the gene therapy that lengthens telomeres reversed aging in animals, and it actually reverses aging in human cells.
Can you feel it?
I feel much better, but we don't know if that's placebo or not. I mean, obviously, I'm very excited.
Well, it's you're the first human to try this gene, gene therapy, and it's safe to say that it's fairly controversial because the procedure is not approved by U.S. authorities.
That's right.
For human trials. In order to do this, you had to go to an undisclosed clinic in Colombia.
Yes.
Sounds very shady. Well, let's put that aside because it's not really relevant to why I want to talk to you today. Because what I think is interesting is the idea behind your project, which is it's a pretty radical idea. In your opinion, aging is not a natural process. You view aging as a disease.
Yeah, absolutely. So naturally, humans die around the age of 35 of infectious disease. This is how humans die. Antibiotics and immunizations changed that. They almost tripled our lifespans, our health spans in a sense. But now we live old longer. This is just the next natural step. Aging is a pathology. It is what is driving cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's. It's why we have thrown billions of dollars at those diseases, and we cannot cure them because we're not curing what is driving the disease. And
which is aging.
Which is aging. It's cellular degeneration, which is a myriad. There's about 9 hallmarks to what's happening at the cellular level.
Because that's how you technically define aging, as cellular degeneration, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So when you look at papers that are coming out of universities now, the disease states are vastly driven by the aging cell, and it implies that. And this is why big companies are now putting big money behind this research. We are at the precipice of actually solving this problem.
So you're saying basically aging causes death?
Aging causes death.
It's the main cause of death.
Well, it's the biggest risk for death is your age.
Jan, what is your opinion on aging as a curable disease?
Well, it's an interesting concept, but I think that calling something a disease doesn't necessarily make it easier to cure it. So, I mean, it's interesting to hear about your project, and you're certainly very brave to undertake radical gene therapies for yourself, because people have died from radical gene therapies. But I guess ultimately the proof is going to be in the pudding. And the thing is that with anti-aging strategies, it's going to take a long time to see if they work or not.
Yeah, it is, and that's why it's really important that we get into humans now. So if we don't drive towards human data, it will take us longer to get there. The reason that we would like aging to be classified as a disease is because when it's classified, money goes into funding the research that goes into it. People can actually study. Yeah, they can actually study it. So if we can classify it as a disease, which it is, then we can actually put the resources into solving the problem that we have been running towards to begin with.
Martin?
Yeah, to me, it seems that much of the opposition to this, to trying to cure aging, is not so much that people disagree about the medical details. I think it's much more of a psychological defense mechanism.
Because it's mind-blowing.
Because if something is just thoroughly bad, so bad you can't do anything about it, it's very tempting to just tell yourself, no, it's not bad at all. You just push it out. So when someone says, this is something we should actually try to study, do something about. Maybe we can cure aging. I think for a lot of people that creates a kind of disturbance because you've pushed this thing out and suddenly it comes back in again. That's very confrontational.
It is.
But maybe that's still the way to go in order to create better lives.
Well, yeah, it's like a fairy tale, I think, and you sit there like a princess from the fairy tales. I mean, it's very... I don't know what to say. It's a future in a way, but I think it's very undemocratic. How will you look at as normal people who are aging and you're sitting there beautiful without wrinkles and? But that's one thing, and I think also that is very undemocratic. I mean, why should you put all these resources in this when the world is so in crisis in lots of other areas? I mean, lots of poor people and
poverty,
and the climate is in crisis. I mean, why should anti-aging be the main project?
Well, we have to make a choice what we want to do with our lives, and ultimate health is where we should be going. And you should look into what my company is doing, because we're actually trying to democratize these therapies. We don't actually think they should cost anything. We have asked for funds for people who have money to pay it forward, for governments to bring down their regulation hurdles so that we can work into humans and they can take over these therapies as governments and give them free to all people.
Yeah, but someone has to pay it.
Exactly, and that's why people are paying forward now to help us achieve our goal now.
But I'm just thinking, is it? I kind of sense there's like, I mean, there's so many old people now in the Western world. I'm thinking it's kind of a paradox that the baby boomers who used to sing a song called "My Generation" are now getting more interested in a song maybe called "My Regeneration," and
Yeah,
I'm thinking, isn't it this idea of aging as a curable disease? It sounds like a perfect marketing concept for narcissistic, wealthy baby boomers.
Well, we hope we achieve it, and I think that we will. The science points to that we will, but we're an organization that's bringing all these therapies together to try them in humans. In the long run, in order to cure biological aging, it will probably be several gene therapies and a couple cell technologies. We hope to be the company that puts those together. We don't believe that it will be one treatment. So it's very exciting, and it sounds very futuristic, but it's actually happening. So there's loads of papers out there now of what we're doing in animal models and what we're doing in human cells, and we're actually seeing this regeneration. We're turning old cells into stem cells again, and we're turning old cells into youthful, functioning cells with fantastic
You're doing this in
mitochondria.
rats, right?
Well, and also in human tissues.
Okay.
But my company wants to bring it to humans. So you have to realize 150,000 people die every day. These are people who were probably sick for 10 to 15 years before they even died. We're trying to offer them a place to go to try therapies. We don't think that it's right to allow people to die because you're so risk adverse to let them try something new.
So it comes back to the medical details.
How's that?
Well, what are we actually going to allow people to do under what circumstances? Because we know that once people get very sick, they become willing to try almost anything. And that's why we regulate medicine very, very closely, because we are aware that people in that situation are very vulnerable.
Don't you see a very huge window here for cynical hucksters and cynical...
But that medicine, even though it goes through a lot of regulations, isn't necessarily regulated well. So let's take case in point.
So let's just put it there that the concept of death and aging as a disease is mind-blowing. I think we have to get over that hurdle before we can get any further, right?
That's why we need human results. That's why people weighed so heavily on the markers that we saw change in my body. I did not turn into a Disney princess. I did not turn 20-year-old
You already were
overnight.
one.
I didn't know.
How old do you think you're going to be, Liz? How old are you going to get?
Biologically.
Final words. How old are you going to get?
If in my lifetime we make the perfect combination, biologically, we will have a cell that behaves very differently than a human cell, because our cells are accumulating damage from a very young age. The ideal cell is a very, very young cell. So I will tell you, I would like to get very chronologically old, but I would like my cells to be very biologically young, and I believe that we can achieve that. people.
To sum it up, I can paraphrase the song I was talking about earlier, the My Generation, My Regeneration. And there's a line there where he says, I hope I die before I get old. I think I would like to say, I hope I die before I get really, 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 really old.
I want you to get really, 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 really old, but just be biologically really young.
With a kick-ass 47-year-old body. Huh? Liz, thank you so much for being here.